You don't want to spotlight yourself.
Hello and welcome to the workshop, the special Q&A episode featuring Peter Greyy. Peter Greyy is a professional touring comedian from way back in the before times, as seen on NBC, and he's an effective comedy coach and director of talent for both the San Francisco Comedy Competition and the Seattle International Comedy Competition. He's performed comedy in clubs, theaters, and festivals across North America and Europe, including multiple performances at both the Bridgetown Comedy Festival and the Bombershoot Music and Arts Festival. Peter's worked with many of today's top comedians, including Jim Gaffigan, Mike Birbiglia, Doug Benson, and the late greats Greg Giraldo and Joan Rivers. Please give a warm welcome to today's special guest for the Q&A, Peter Greyy.
Canada not okay, fine. I'll live. Hello, welcome. I'm here from surprisingly sunny Seattle, and I'm interested in hearing why I'm here. That would be wonderful. I think Jester explained kind of the various things I've done in comedy. I don't know if there's much more that you'd be interested in, but I'll give you just a little bit of background. I grew up in the Midwest, central Wisconsin to be exact. I first worked in radio right out of high school. I went to broadcasting school, did radio for 5 years. I was an award-winning advertising copywriter. I mostly worked for country music radio stations. And I had hair at the time that was very Robert Smith of The Cure, so they always used to send me to pick up the awards in person and freak out all the squares. After that, I got into nightclub DJing. I worked at a top independent record store when I moved out here to Seattle. And then my life went kablooey at the end of 2002, and not knowing what exactly else I could do, I was encouraged to take a beginning stand-up comedy class, despite the fact that I had tried to do stand-up comedy 3 times before, and it had always gone horribly wrong. I did not intend to do stand-up comedy by taking the class. I just wanted to hang out with creative people. But it turned out that I had an affinity for it once I figured out what stand-up comedy was, which was not just being funny like you are with your friends on stage, that you actually had to come up with material and hone and refine your act. I got started pretty quick. I was hosting pretty big shows within 6 months. Being old does that to you. And where you're given responsibility beyond your ability. And I managed to put together a pretty decent career out of it. As Jester mentioned, I got to tour all across the entire continental U.S. I've performed many times in Canada. I did a headlining tour of the Balkan countries. And I performed in the UK as well. Yes, English only shows in Serbia, Bosnia Herzegovina, Croatia, and Slovenia. And I'm dying to go back. They didn't understand what the WWE or the UFC was, but most of my other references they understood. I also became a show producer. I produced a very influential live alt comedy variety show. A show that brought some people like Reggie Watts for the first time. We had Jeff Dye, who's at some level of success. Hari Kondabolu was part of our weekly cast, and a few others that are more regionally specific. We also had, if you're a fan of 80s hip hop, we had on my show the first time that Shock G, aka Humpty Hump, the late Greg Jacobs from Digital Underground, did stand-up comedy for the first time on my show. We also accidentally had right-wing troll Owen Benjamin on our show, not meaning to, but he was in town and we let him go up. And then he heckled the rest of our performers during our show, and we don't talk about him anymore. That show lasted for a while, and it helped me get into the Seattle International Comedy Competition as a performer, and then later taking on various duties, including official scorekeeper, official photographer, and then eventually director of talent, where I make all the decisions on who gets into that. That event is produced by John Fox, who also produces the San Francisco Comedy Competition, and so I was later given control of picking the people for that as well. So that's the good news. The bad news is I have an 11-year-old son, and I pretty much stopped touring as a performer soon after he was born, just to be more present in the parenting. I don't begrudge him that. It was fun making him, and he's a fun kid. The other thing that has happened recently is my wife passed away just after Christmas of this year. So all of those credits that I have may be going away as a single dad. I don't know if I can devote the same amount of time to the competitions as I had in the past. Because it's very important to me that the performers that choose to put themselves up for my consideration for these events are treated the way that I, as a comedian, would have wanted to be treated, with respect, hope, and information. And it takes a long time to do that. And I made it a point to do so. I also made it a point to wear a Seattle Kraken t-shirt, which will soon be in the NHL and soon be continuing the tradition of not allowing Canadian teams in the Stanley Cup. So that's who I am. Now, I've also been teaching the very class I took. Because I have an affinity for writing and I love the structure of joke construction, and I really take time to make certain that absolute beginners have a wonderful first experience doing comedy. Everyone deserves that. And then you can start to hate life when you get into the open mic scene. But that first time should be wonderful. And I've spent years making certain it has been for hundreds of people here in the Seattle area. I also broke out during COVID and did some Zoom classes through rekindleschool.com that included a few Canadian participants, which is unusual because usually you have to be in Seattle to bask in my wisdom or whatever. Whether I continue to do that, whether I continue with the competitions, all really up in the air. I don't know what life is like at this point in time. I have noticed I've stopped shaving. That's weird. I don't normally look like Santa Claus, but here you go. So I have a wealth of information in the war times and definite strong opinions of the now times. And I am very interested in hearing if I can be of help to anybody here.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's introduce our Q&A panel who will be asking you some questions today. And then also all of these people will be performing a brief stand-up set on an assigned topic because that's how we roll in the workshop.
Oh, nice.
Please welcome today Scott Porteous.
Hello.
Hey.
Lucia Roberto.
Hello, so happy to be here. Nice to have you.
Wardy Lapan.
Hi there. Great to see you.
Lachlan.
Hello, thank you.
Dr. Ellen from Chicago.
Hi.
Bruce Lipsky.
Hello there.
And myself, Jester Lind. And a huge welcome today to Peter, and thank you again for being our guest today.
Good to be here.
This is a reminder to anyone who's watching. You guys can interact and send in questions of your own that we can put on screen. If you're using Facebook, please remember to grant permission so we can give you credit for your question. All right. I'm going to start out with a question of my own, and then we're going to kind of just roll through. If anyone has a follow-up question, try to jump on it when it makes sense to. So, Wardy, as a booker, what is something that you've come to identify as an immediate red flag?
You said Wardy, you meant Peter, right?
Oh, sorry. I said Porty. I meant Peter. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at your name. Sorry. I'm a little bit dyslexic. I'm sorry, Peter.
Red flags. When it comes to the competition, I think it's different than a club show, obviously. In a club show, there are fewer red flags. People kind of sink or swim on their own. Now, in Seattle, we're really sphinctery about language and things like that. So you have to know your market, know what won't be acceptable. Like I said, Seattle is very, very left-wing. And that does bring some just effectiveness questions. I'm not saying that if you are a right-wing leaning performer, you won't get time in Seattle. Dave Mortal from the first season of Last Comic Standing, very right-wing from Minneapolis, an ex-Marine, but also does very well out here in Seattle because his material isn't dogmatic. It comes from a place where other people can relate to it. For the competition, red flags. If they don't have a video from a comedy club, but instead record using a hairbrush into their mirror. Or I've had audio recordings sent in. I've had people write out their jokes and ask me, is this okay for the competition? We do make what we expect very explicit in the application page. If they're not willing to read that or don't understand what we're looking for, chances are they're not going to go very far in the consideration process. The shows are generally for a older audience. Most of the shows take place in theaters. So I'm not a prude. I certainly don't stop a dirty comedian from joining the competition. There is at least one night where the entire set has to be clean. So if you see a video and you can't imagine that done clean, like there's no glimpse of anything other than filth, that's usually a red flag, at least of caution. Maybe it's a yellow flag. But other than that, I try to take everyone for what they're capable of doing. I try to see them at their best, which hopefully their videotape should be them at their best, and consider their best against the best of other performers and try to put together a roster that makes some sort of sense. It's not all just the same thing, but it shows a variety of different styles, techniques, demographics, etc. So that as the competition, these are touring festivals I work for. They go from venue to venue. Each event takes a month, and people drop out as the weeks progress. So they have to be. You have to put on a show that doesn't just necessarily super serve one demographic, but can perform and be entertaining to different groups of people in the Pacific Northwest or in Northern California. So red flags, the same type of red flags from making new friends. That's the way I look at it. Would I want to hang out with these people? Because I would have to for a month. If I don't, that might be a little bit difficult.
Can I just add to that follow-up question? I've never quite understood what a definition of clean comedy is.
Yeah.
Yucks here in Ottawa see me as a clean comic. I don't swear. But I am quite scatological. So I'm never quite sure whether the definition of clean varies across.
Oh, it definitely does.
I never swear. And I don't talk about gross stuff. Although, as I said, I'm scatological, so poop and farting definitely appear. But I'm not sure whether I'm a clean comic or not. So I never know when competitions require clean comics, whether what fits and what doesn't.
That's a good question. And you're absolutely right. It does change depending on the circumstances and location. I generally found that in my time performing in Canada, that there are some things that seem common to Canadian comedians, racial material that would not be considered clean or appropriate here in Seattle. Again, we're really sphinctery about this stuff. It's hard to describe it. But if you're looking for a definition of clean, which unfortunately is like this, I think a congressman in the U.S. said about pornography. I don't know how to describe it to you, but I know it when I see it. You're right. Swearing is generally the first thing. That's the first thing you couldn't do on American television, or at least you couldn't before cable. Let's see. Generally graphic depictions of sex or bathroom stuff. It's not just talking about poop. It's describing the method of pooping. That type of thing. There was a clean comedy club in Seattle for a while, but the only rule was you couldn't drop an F-bomb. Everything else was okay. And that's a very different definition than most places. Typically, if you could get away with doing that set on television, and I guess American television, and I would further qualify that by saying not necessarily late at night cable television, but broadcast TV, then it would be considered clean. In the competitions, in the competition in Seattle, there is one clean night where everyone has to do at least a 4-minute set clean. It's limited between 4 and 7 minutes, but you only have to do 4 minutes clean. And my rule is generally, if you're in doubt, leave it out, because when people are in a situation where they're judging, whether it's the audience knowing it's a competition show or the actual judges that we use, they tend to be more picky. They tend to be judgmental when you let them judge. So there was one performer I remember in the past 10 years who did an entire set where they described the Underground Railroad. They used the Underground Railroad as an analogy for a very explicit sexual joke. And although no swearing was used, it was very clear what, and graphic and explicit without swearing. And he got slightly dinged, like a half-point penalty for not meeting the clean standards. And he was against that, saying, hey, I didn't swear. And we had explained, it's not just swearing. Sometimes you make a jerk-off motion, that's not a clean set, in my estimation. It would be in some others. And that's what makes the whole clean versus dirty. I've been on clean shows where comedians have sworn before, and they were appreciative that it was a clean set. I've done a completely squeaky clean set where I referred to the idea that a teenager might pleasure themselves without using any of those type of words. And the people that booked the show complained to me and kept me off the Late Show because of that. So there's no real good, absolute, written in concrete type of answer. If you are asked to do clean, it's perfectly acceptable to ask what those limitations are so that you know going into it. I think it's also a good thing to practice. If you are a comedian that's used to working with complete language and performance freedom, put yourself through the test of trying to do something with limitations. Can I get the same laughter from jokes if I don't go to the goosing words of swearing or sex or anything else that just artificially inflates the tension that leads to release in the punchline? Dave Mortal, who I mentioned before, had a joke about how you can put any name you want to on your grocery store loyalty card, and they are forced to then say that name when they hand you the receipt. And he had a very funny, Johnson McHugecock type of an answer for it. And he was going on the Tonight Show, and we sat in a hotel room, about three of us, trying to come up with a clean version of that joke. And he eventually just ditched the joke, saying, I can do this live and in clubs, but it's not going to work on the Tonight Show. I also worked with another comedian, Tammy Pescatelli, who was also on season 2 or 3 of Last Comic Standing. And she had a similar situation where she had jokes that just wouldn't quite work on television. But she tried to do the jokes with alternate insert words, and the laughs just didn't come because she didn't feel confident that she could get the same laugh with softer language. Because she never practiced it. She never tried to do it. Just some enlightening examples, from my time in comedy. I hope that helped. I know I didn't give you a complete or specific answer, but you're right. It's absolutely dependent on where it is and dependent on the circumstances you find yourself in.
Thanks.
All right. Next up to ask a question, we've got Lachlan.
Oh, hello. I'm 3 years into comedy. I've never been into a competition or a festival or anything like that. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell me a little bit about the difference between the two. I know the obvious difference, but in terms of their value and competitiveness and that sort of thing.
Well, both of the events have a similar format. So if you're looking for differences between them, the obvious one, as you alluded to, one is in Northern California, the other one is in Western Washington. But they both have the same formula. We invite 32 comedians, split, into 2 weeks of 16 comedians. They do a week's worth of shows. 5 comedians from the 16 go on to the next round. So there are 10 comedians in what would be the third week, but it's the second week for those performers. That gets narrowed. They do another week's worth of shows. That gets narrowed down to 5. And those 5 do a week worth of shows. And the amount of time you do goes up in each one, but it's in different venues. So you can do the same set every night. It's different judges every night. What are the value of doing it? Well, first off, it can really tell you where you are, how you compare to other performers on a nightly basis, your ability to adapt to what is a pretty stressful situation. I mean, most comedians, they perform and they judge themselves based on the laughter or response that they get throughout a set. And in these events, we use arbitrary numbers given by judges, a different group of judges every night. And while we have a really complicated scoring system, the human element of you like what you like is such a part of it. And that can be a really weird thing for comedians to deal with, is just that sense that they're being judged in ways that they're not used to. I know a lot of our former winners and finalists and even semifinalists have gone on to extremely strong careers. The biggest winner for American audiences was probably Preacher Lawson in Seattle, who then went on to final in America's Got Talent the next year. But there are a ton of people I can point to and say, yep, they've got a great career, they've got a great career, they've got a great career. Is that because they did the Seattle or San Francisco competition? Or am I just pretty obvious in picking good people to do it? I don't know. I don't know that. I think it's valuable. I competed in both the Seattle and San Francisco competition as a performer. It got rid of, pardon my language, but it got rid of a lot of bullshit in my act. I started thinking about the efficiency of how I said things. And you're hearing me in this live Q&A wondering, where's the efficiency now? How come you can't edit yourself and give shorter answers? But the competition is like a crucible. It's the fire that burns away any excess fat in what you do, because you have a limited time and everything you do is being judged, and you better have a good opener and you better have a good closer. But honestly, I think most comedians would agree that the experience of doing it is unrivaled in the amount of time you get to spend with other really funny people. You come out of these events knowing people in different parts of the country, different parts of Canada, different parts of the world when it comes to Seattle, because it is an international competition. And now you've got an ally in those events. You've got a apartment to crash in. You've got a good word at the local clubs. It's a great way to accelerate your development, as long as you can hang, as long as you prove yourself to be somewhat funny, knowing that really only one person ends up these events happy. The other 31 think they were robbed. So, but that's true of any competitive event. The differences between Seattle and San Francisco takes place in the late summer. Seattle's takes place typically in November, where it's really wet and rainy here. This is a beautiful town, but not necessarily in November. Seattle posits itself as an international comedy competition, and I have made it a big thing for me to go out and find international talent willing to come to Seattle and participate in it. We've had comedians from Hong Kong, from Japan, from Croatia and Slovenia. Hint as to why I ended up headlining a tour there. And Australia, England, Germany. We had one from the Netherlands in 2019. So it is a great way to see how these different, Italy, Luca. It's a great way to see yourself as part of a world community of comedy. And my parents were sports people. So the idea of marrying up comedy and statistics in one thing, it makes my hair go away from my head. I just so much fun.
Thank you.
I hope somewhere in there was an answer.
Thanks.
Jester, you're muted.
Oh, am I still muted or no?
Next, nope, I'm muted. Next up, we've got a question from Dr. Ellen from Chicago.
So, oh my gosh, hang on, my screen just did something weird. First of all, thank you, because I appreciate the clarity of your answers. And thanks, Scott, too. I'm excited for this. What I wanted to ask you is kind of two parts of the same thing. And one is how I want to have a way to judge how I'm growing. And I want to know, the part one is, what things do you see that you recognize in a comedian that makes a submission that are valuable to you? I mean, it's sort of the opposite of a red flag.
Well, let's talk about scale first. We have 32 spots in each competition. So I get 64 people because I don't like to let one do both competitions the same year. That's 64 slots. We've had as many as 1,300 applicants in any one year. Yes, I watch every single video submission and go through them and consider what they would bring to the competition, whether they're ready for it, whether or not the combination of other performers chosen matches them. It is definitely more of an art than a science putting a roster together. What I'm looking for from someone who's submitting, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a submission from someone who's absolutely ready to win the thing, full stop. Although the event, I mean, at my last cut, I don't want to put anyone in there who doesn't have a chance of winning it. That makes sense. But because there are so many people applying, I'm more looking for reasons no than reasons to say, well, they weren't very good, but they did this well. I'll give them a shot. That is a luxury that I have been able to afford because we've had so many options available to us. But I also teach absolute beginners. So I'm sensitive to the idea that I should be overly critical of someone's development. Sometimes you can help guide an entrant to submit a better entry next year. And we've had many people who I've rejected. And I hate using that word because, again, I only have so many spots. So most people are not rejected. Most people just don't get picked. I think there's a big difference there. But occasionally there are people who just did not show me a competition consideration worthy video. And in that case, I can kind of guide them to the type of things that are expected from performers to get real consideration in this event. I guess I would go so far as to say that those people were rejected, but I try not to. So what I'm looking for is, do they have a clear sense of who they are as a comic? I like to talk about the comic through line, which is an unstated phrase by which the audience can start to anticipate your reactions to a presented premise. Something consistent so that the audience can latch onto it. I think the best comics have that, where they have, like, the audience can predict, oh, Mike Birbiglia is going to react that way, or John Mulaney is going to react that way, or, you know, the late Paul Mooney would react this way to that. And you can kind of get that from what they do. I like performers who feel natural and comfortable on stage if that fits their comedy persona. I also love the super nervous, deadpan, snarky, surreal one-liner comics. I don't think there's any one template that I look for, but I'm looking to see if they do what they do well and that they have a sense that they are knowing what they're trying to do. Someone who's up there floundering around hoping to stumble into a laugh is probably not going to do well in the competition. But I have made lots of friends who have applied multiple times for the competition, and I haven't put them in, and I really like their comedy. Sometimes it's because they're not quite there yet. Other times it's because what they do isn't really competition friendly. There's a Scottish comedian, I'm thinking of Dino Wyand, who does some great meta anti-comedy. And I love him, and I love what he does. I just know that he would go out there every night and get low scores from the judges because they don't know how to judge that. They don't have the frame of reference to get what they're going for. That happened in San Francisco with a music comedian performer named DJ Real, and he's strong. He's out of the Bay Area. I've loved what he's done for many years, but my producer, John Fox, said, why did you put him in the competition? What he's doing isn't comedy. It's like, what he's doing is really funny and inventive, and this is, you're ahead of the game by having him in there in this event. But it's not like he won the thing. Sometimes you want that little agent of chaos to toss into the mix. Sometimes it's just forces someone to fail night after night, and you don't want to put someone in that situation. So what am I looking for? Show me the best way that you could make me laugh. It's as simple as that. If it's ready, I'll pick you. If you're someone that the competition would benefit by having in it, I'll pick you. If not, nothing wrong with that. Because like I said, only 32 people get picked. And I look forward to seeing your progress the next year.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Ellen. Dr. Ellen.
All right. Next up, we've got a question coming for you, Peter, from Bruce Lipsky.
Bruce.
Thank you very much. Greetings from New York City here. A couple of things is, I'm 65 years old, going on 66. Do you see age as a barrier to success in comedy?
That is an excellent question. As someone who just turned 56, I am well aware that, like most performing arts, stand-up comedy can be a bit young-centric. There are certainly examples of performers who started very late or who found their success very late. Lewis Black or Rodney Dangerfield. These performers were not, cranking it out in the clubs when they were 20. They came to stand-up comedy late and found a market for themselves. The grind of stand-up comedy, the feeling like you have to go to open mic after open mic, you have to put yourself on the road for long, triple run length tours, not very conducive to a person who isn't willing to sleep on somebody's floor. And at 56, I can tell you I'm not willing to do that. Now, that said, there are headliners in the Seattle area who are older than I am and who work constantly. These San Francisco comedy competition was won many years ago, but not that many, like within this century, by J. Wendell Walker, who I think is 206 years old. He's definitely up there in age. We have had success in the competition because, again, it's sometimes opposing paradigms. If all you see are 20-year-old white guys complaining about not getting laid, theater audience who's 45 plus and able to spend the kind of money for these shows would really like to hear from somebody who they can relate to a bit more. Someone who might not do as well in the club as those young guys, but in that theater setting are perfect. And so every year we tend to have a comedian who is a little older. Some have had great success. Some have struggled. Again, there's no one way to do any of this. I think being able to pick and choose your opportunities, and the wonderful thing about stand-up comedy is you can define your own level of success. Everything is open and available to you, but you don't have to do everything. You know what I'm saying? Like at some point in time, a comedian might realize that I would be better off producing my own show on a regular basis in one venue than trying to go around a great expanse, hitting up club after bar after whatever. Being honest with yourself, once you've got the basic tools, you can choose how hard and in what direction you want to pursue this. It wasn't like that. It used to be, you're not a real comic unless you blah, 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 blah. But I think there's so many avenues and so many roads, and the democracy of the internet is there for you. Yes. Is that a young person's game? Sure. But that doesn't mean you can't carve out your own piece of it. So keeping your expectations in mind, not in line, but in mind. I think there's every room for people of all ages. Although the younger people, like the under 15 people, have a difficulty because they haven't lived enough life to have many things to react to. I think an older performer has had more life and therefore a greater well to draw comedic water from. I hope so. Otherwise, we're looking at nightmare scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you. Right.
Next up, we've got a question from one of our Facebook viewers, Norm Shaw, who asks, will video of comedians in backyards over the past 14 months work as a submission?
First off, hi, Norm, and good to hear from you. And great work with the Fire Pit Comedy Tour. I follow your posts and Lars's posts pretty regularly. That's an excellent question. And as you know, our events have been running for a long time. The last Seattle event in 2019 was its 40th annual. And that same year, San Francisco was, I think, 44 years. I haven't been part of it. I would have been 12 at the start of San Francisco. I joined much later. But they were a regular thing. And last year, the lockdowns stopped those events from happening. What was interesting was my producer, John Fox, was certain that COVID would be over and done with and that both competitions would run as normal. So he kept the applications process open throughout the entire thing. But thankfully, I don't think anybody applied. I certainly didn't look at any because I kind of knew we were not going to go back there. I have a meeting with John this weekend, so I get to hear what he thinks about our plans for this year are. Normally, we'd be open for applications right now, and I don't believe that we are unless they're still open from last year. I said very, very clearly that it would be the competitions want to skim the cream off the top. You know what I'm saying? You know, get people at their best. And let's skip back there for a second. I don't want to review anything from a Zoom comedy show. The vibes are different. The expectations are different. The presentation is different. The way you respond to what little audience feedback you can get is different. I don't want to be comparing apples to oranges, but at the same point in time, I don't want to be looking at videotapes from pre-COVID because I don't know if they're relevant. If you've taken a year plus off and haven't been practicing this stuff, you're not going to deliver it the same way. I don't know what audiences are like. I know that we're still limited as far as our audience size here in Seattle. Some clubs have tried to open. There are even some open mics starting. But I don't know if the same shove people as close as possible together so that when one laughs, the shrapnel hits everybody else. I don't know if that same stand-up comedy experience is available. I have said in the past that as long as I can see the performer, hear the performer, recognize that there is an audience there, it didn't matter to me if it was in a top club or in a bar or something, alternative to that. So would I take a good set from a backyard comedy show in the middle of COVID? I probably would. But I probably would be cautious about it. And I definitely would not want to see clips taken from Zoom shows. I just think that it's too different. Ideally, I'll be honest with you, don't tell my boss, I would love it if we waited another year and let audiences and performers get back to a new normal rather than try and force this through now when your best performers are rusty, when audiences aren't certain they feel comfortable showing up how sad would it be to fly over here from France for your big international comedy competition event and see a third full room? Oh, it just breaks my heart to think about. Yeah. So, Norm, if I'm still in this job this year and you want to submit something from the Backyard Fire Pit Comedy Tour, I would definitely take a look at that. Because what else could you have done? You can't perform for, the people from a balcony in your apartment. There's my answer.
Great. Awesome. Next up, we've got a question from Lucia Ribeiro.
Hey!
Hi, thank you. My question is, in whatever way it's still, I guess, doable for you, how do you organize your jokes? What do you use, or what method do you use to organize jokes?
When I perform, like a set list, you're asking?
Are you talking about an index card with the bullet points of what your jokes are?
Yeah, that's what it eventually comes down to. Great question. Thank you. I like talking about performing as well because competitions are such a weird thing, but I want to make certain that my love for performing comedy is still accurately defined. When I perform myself, I do take a notebook, say like this sized, pretty small, and I'll write out the one word title I've given to certain bits, organize them per line so that I know what bits I think go together. And then I will take that on stage and never look at it. I put it down underneath a bottle of water, like a napkin. It's there if I need it. I haven't needed it in 16 years. Because the act of writing it down puts it into my head. I think it's important to know what your closing joke is. The standard has always been your best joke is your closer, your second best joke is your opener. I don't know if I believe that, but I know why, because it's important to open with a laugh. You need to uncross the arms. You need to prove to audience members who don't know you that you're worth paying attention to and that you're going to be funny in the time that you're on stage. So an opener is very important. The closing joke is also important. You need to get a big enough laugh to walk off stage with. You want that laughter and applause to continue until the MC comes up and gets you another, round of applause for having done a great job. And a great closer can make up for a pretty weak middle. There are different methods for constructing a set. Sometimes people talk in a linear fashion, like the topics naturally lead into one another. Other people are more scattershot, and they can kind of pick and choose like a Chinese menu, one from column A, one from column B. Working with Joan Rivers was like that. She had huge TV-sized cue cards that she had planted in 5 different places at the front of the stage. The audience couldn't see it, but they had a separate list of like 10 jokes she could do. And as she meandered about the stage, she looked down, pick one to do, walk to another part of the stage, pick one, do one to do. All the time surfing, because she was experienced in knowing the type of jokes that would go well after the joke she just told. If she needed a quick, short joke to get the laughter back when something didn't work, or if she could go into a longer, more involved story. I generally feel it's important in your opening joke, say something pretty obvious about yourself or the surroundings you find yourself in. I think that's a great way to make certain that the audience is aware that this is personalized for them. I like having a couple of rat-a-tat short jokes up front to get that laughter momentum going. And then the longer bits I would put towards like 2/3 of the way through. But again, a lot of it depends on, are you telling a coherent story? Do the jokes you tell in the middle part of the act depend on things you taught the audience in the beginning part of the act? That will always take precedence, because I've always said that the act of stand-up comedy is the act of translating what's funny in your head and sharing it in such a way that someone who doesn't share your frame of reference also finds it funny. So sometimes you need to give them the information for them to get it. And then once you've given them that information, you can build on that. You can take that in different places because they already know certain things, either about you or the way you think. That's the best thing I think that open mics are for, just trying to figure out what's the best order to do certain jokes, what the audience needs to know in order to get certain other jokes, and therefore you need to put your jokes in a certain way. There's also one other thing, which is called the escalation of intimacy, which means that you shouldn't start off by telling your most private thoughts. You need to work the audience up to that. Although there is shock value in having a butt sex opening joke, probably best to push that later in the set, once they've gotten to know you a bit. The other thing too, if they like you, if you establish your likability in the beginning part of the set, you get more rope to say things that are not necessarily so likable later on in the set. That is a wonderful weapon to have. You can get away with murder if they like you enough to say, oh, I see, you're being funny now, type of a thing. In my own career, I've done jokes about news headlines. And there was a news headline that said something about sexually adventurous teen girls are more likely to commit suicide. And I flip that joke around saying, so the tip for you guys, always hit on the sad girls. They do anything. And then when you don't call them back, they blame themselves. Win, win, win. I couldn't open with that joke. That joke had to be delivered after I'd proven that I was a decent human being and this is just a joke. If I opened with that, well, then I'm Anthony Jeselnik. And then that's all you can do. And that's not a slam on Anthony Jeselnik. I'm just saying that you can do riskier things if the audience is willing to give you that opportunity to do so. An apology to anyone sexually adventurous and suicidal.
Yeah, the big girls too. They're more appreciative of whatever they could get.
Yes. And as a person of size myself, I am thankful that those women exist, Lucy.
A follow-up question, actually. Once you have a lot of jokes accumulated, then how do you organize them? Do you I once heard actually that Joan Rivers had an old-fashioned library card catalog system to organize her jokes. So
famously in the movie Jerry Seinfeld Comedian, Orny Adams has files upon files of jokes. Most people do things with computers. Sadly, too many people do them on their phone. But it's a matter of if you're performing often enough, you can play around with it until it feels right. Unfortunately, this does lead to a certain calcification for people who have been performing for a long time, where you can't imagine doing your act in different ways, or you're so dependent on getting certain laughs that you don't swap out old jokes for new jokes. Say what you will about what he does with people who don't know that that's what he's going to do to them. But I like when Louis C.K. started taking his old set, making his closer his opener, and then feeling like he had to write new material that would be strong enough to follow what used to be his closer. I loved when he started doing a whole new hour every year, which is kind of the UK model where they go up, do the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and then tour that for half the year, then start writing their next year's hour-long set to do at Edinburgh. I love that because it pulls the creativity and it keeps your act from being frozen in amber. And I am definitely someone who fell into that trap after years of writing tons of material. I got a road act that worked, and then I didn't feel like I could swap anything out. And the sad thing is, and I don't mean to make this too sad, but a lot of it was about being married and being widowed is like, I don't want to tell those jokes. You know, I don't want to tell the jokes I had written, and I don't want to tell the jokes I'm thinking about writing right now because I'm in a pretty dark place, and those wouldn't be likable. But as far as organizing it, whatever works for you, you know, there's no right or wrong answer to that. There are certainly computer programs that help you move things around. But if you're performing regularly, you know, it's nice to mess things up, jumble things up, and see what comes out. But if you find a system that works for you, do it. I can't send you to comedy.com for the instant joke organizer. There isn't one yet. Ooh, that's an idea.
Speaking of comedy organizers, next up we've got a question from the founder and absolute champion of the Comedy Workshop, Scott Porteous.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. Thank you so much, Peter, for doing this. My mouth is still frozen, so please.
What's wrong with your face?
I was born with that. So anyway,
maybe it's Maybelline.
So what I wanted to work with me, mouth. Okay. So what I wanted to ask was, not to go back to the competition aspect of it, but for production wise, because I actually tried to, before this all happened, I was trying to plan some things myself, like a tour as well as a comedy festival in actually Vancouver Island. So what I wanted to ask you was, what would you suggest in terms of like, because I know you have like venues that are connected to do shows and stuff like that. So what would you suggest be the best approach to make and getting people to like being on board with doing shows in terms of like for like a festival or something of that nature?
What you're asking me, Scott. Sorry. What is the best way to convince people to want to do shows? Did I miss something in this?
You know what? Maybe I'll ask my second question. I realized what I asked, and yeah, that's fair enough. I wrote this one down though. So
okay, all right. Give it to me again.
Okay, let's pretend that never happened. Okay, so here we go. Through all the competitions you were involved in, what style of comedy for you seemed to be the most consistent? Like, did it evolve, or was it always like the audience gravitate towards certain on average?
Honestly, I think it's more personality driven than stylistically driven.
Okay.
A comedian like Matt Donaher, who is a short, nerdy, one-liner comic, how does that compare to Damon Schritter? A storytelling comic, also diminutive. I guess that's what you have to be short. That's the rule.
Oh shit!
But I mean, both Schritter and Donaher won the Seattle competition. You get very highly physicality-based comics like Marcus, who took second place to Eliza Schlesinger in Last Comic Standing, or Michael Malone, and compare that to a Southern drawl storyteller like Mike Baldwin. I mean, our last winner in Seattle, Nancy Norton, is a over 50 ex-lesbian, she calls herself, with kids. And she would both tell stories and tell jokes, and it was a winning combination for her. I don't think, like I said, there's no one way to win either of these events, because it's slightly a war of attrition. Can you keep doing it night after night?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also about making good first impression. And the audience isn't there to see a specific style of comedy. They're there to see what you do. And if what you do is what they like, then it works. And if what you do is not what they like, then it can go really badly. I have a great story about a local comedian here in Seattle named Emmett Montgomery. Emmett Montgomery is he's from Utah. He's ex-Mormon. He looks like he should be on a southern plantation sipping a mint julep, but he tells weird art stories in a slow, very alt comedy template sort of way. And he's become like a local treasure. People just love what he does. But when we took him out to, say, Yakima, Washington, that is not the comedy they wanted. They wanted Dylan Mandelson. They wanted crazy, active, fun, and Emmett gave them stand in one place, talk softly, say weird things. And those judges hated Emmett to the point where they never had comedy in that venue again, fearing that they might get a performer like Emmett. But then the next night we came back to Seattle, we had industry night. All of the judges were from Paramount or NBC or Comedy Central. And Emmett was the top person on their ballot the very next night. He didn't change, but the expectations of the audience, the circumstances changed around him. So, like I said, there's no one way to go. The important thing is for you as a performer to be the best version of you. And I think what every comedian needs to do is to try and figure out what that is. And I think a lot of comedians don't know yet. They're throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall, hoping something sticks. Well, when it does, latch onto that and see how you can make that, clearly what you're aiming to do. Did that in any way come close to your question, Scott?
The second one, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Awesome. We're gonna move on now, and we're going to do a rapid fire version of the workshop where each of us was given an assigned topic, and we're gonna do a couple of minutes of material on that topic. We're gonna close, I think, tonight with Peter, since he's our headliner tonight. So we're gonna go in the order you see on screen now. If you read it like a comic book, that's the system. An American comic book. All right, starting out with me. I was given the word fox, and they have given me a lot of material, like definitely too much material. In fact, so much material that there's currently court cases calling consuming a high amount of fox material foxmania or foxitis, and they're using it as a defense for storming the Capitol. Hope that works out for you guys. I have heard a lot about a cover-up that the Biden administration has been doing. They've been real quiet about one particular thing all of a sudden. Joe Biden used to be pretty public about this, but then he went quiet about this. He has a weird bathroom technique where he sits with a leg on either side of the toilet. They're being very quiet about this, and he uses the toilet tank as a little desk. And he does it, and he straddles the bowl, and he reads a book and writes some notes. Now, I am not saying that I do not appreciate an American president with a good work ethic, but ew, I didn't want to know that. You can please just keep that covered up. Keep everything bathroom related covered up, for sure. Tucker Carlson is just yesterday said that he's upset with the Pentagon prioritizing diversity over UFOs, proving once again that he cares even about green people more than brown people. Is Tucker Carlson a racist? Is he stoking fear and distracting us by asking questions? I don't know. I'm just asking questions. Man, I also learned from, sometimes I learn things if I watch Fox News for occasion. Like I learned politics is a compound word. It's a combination of the Greek poly, which means many, and ticks, meaning blood-sucking parasites. According to Fox, it's many blood-sucking parasites. I don't know. They've got this whole "Give me Dave and Buster's" or "Give me death, freedom" angle on right now. Getting all mad about potatoes. Potatoes, by the way, who could swap parts between the male and female version the whole time. I don't know. That's a weird hill to die on. But anyways, I would have written more material on this, but that would have required that I watch more Fox News. So I'm all done, you guys. Thank you.
I got one thing I put in. Sorry, I was distracted by the chats. I got one thing I added that I was looking. Can Fox, like the network, call a cease and desist order on referring to the actual animal? I think that'd be a funny concept.
That'd be clever.
They haven't trademarked it in all this time, the Fox animal. So,
I just figured it's an easier target. I went for the easy target. Fox is Fox. Yeah. I could have talked about, if I wanted foxes being an easy target, I could have talked about fox hunting, where they release a fox into the wild just to hunt it by having dogs just tear it apart. But that got real sad real quick. Even sadder than Fox News. So I was like, oh, cut it. All right.
I like the toilet desk. That was funny.
Or is it a joke?
That's a real thing. He used to brag about it all the time, until about 4 years ago, and his staff went, "Stop telling people that, Joe." It's a real thing. He still does it. He just doesn't talk about it.
To play off Dr. Allen, I thought it'd be funny. How about it was Joe Bidet instead of Joe Biden?
Oh,
Joe, nice.
Joe Bidet.
Such a European elite.
I like that.
Are you?
It's always important to have a good angle on a bidet. Next up, we're gonna
Lachlan.
Lachlan?
No, he's not doing one. He's just here for the Q&A.
He's just enjoying. So we've got. Are you how's your mouth, Scott? Is that the Novocaine, or is that just your Canadian accent? It's hard to tell.
Aren't you Canadian too?
I am.
Yeah.
I'm sick.
It's both. I'll work this out. I will enunciate. I'm actually concerned that my dentures going to fall out and I won't even feel it. So there we go. So I actually I struggled writing jokes on my topic because my bed is so hard to write on, and it was tough to find a time between video games and binge watching. Then I was ready to write, and I got hungry, and it's hard to concentrate on an empty stomach. But my roommate was in the kitchen, and I'm a shy cooker, so I had to wait for him to leave. And when he finally did, it was already late, and I was ready to go to bed. But this is what I was able to write on the topic of lame excuses. So if it's funny that my mouth is frozen too. It's not an excuse, but it really is. If you don't know the definition of an excuse, just watch every presidential debate or almost every tweet from a political figure. So like, excuses are lame as it is. Like, so how does one make an excuse to be even more lame? And the only thing I can think of is like exaggeration. Like the classic "dog ate my homework." Now, there are so many candidates for that to already be an excuse without the dog, right? Like I lost my homework, or someone stole my homework, or my homework was offensive to my religion and beliefs, or someone hashtag canceled my homework, or someone took my homework to Congress to try and get it to pass a bill to get it changed because the word homework is offensive to those who don't have homes. Any of those sounds far more possible than a dog eating someone's homework. Like for so many reasons, like the diet of the dog, unless you wrote your homework on your sock, I don't know, or like the breed of the dog, because no one's going to believe that a Chihuahua ate your essay on War and Peace. I mean, I suppose if you said your dog ate your homework and then press charges on the person who assigned it to you because your pet died as a result, that would be a practical excuse. But that's all I can think of. That's my side. Thank you.
I liked all the angles. There's a lot of things that can happen to homework, and there was a lot of fun takes on that.
Thank you.
I'm doing the classic open mic thing, Scott, of concentrating on what I'm planning on performing a little bit later and not being. But I applauded when you nailed a rule of threes joke, and then you kept going into a list, but you cranked the energy up that almost made it a run. So I absolve you of any of my complaints on that.
Thank you. I'm a fan of John Wayne and list jokes, so I do what I can.
Fair enough. By the way, I want to point something out to people in chat. That rocking noise is not because I'm fat. I'm not making the rocking noise. I saw that in chat. I'm like, what? Someone is doing a leather what? Like, that's not me. It's not me. It's not me. I'm very calmly planted. I'm sitting on a purple cushion. No noise is being made from this part of the country.
Yeah, some of our comments think there's a roast show for some reason. So
yeah, we got a roast comedian and we got a heckler, you guys.
Oh, we got a few.
Oh, it brings me back to the before times.
Good all 2019. Any more feedback for that?
No, Scott, nicely done.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And under medical duress, no less. That was fantastic.
The show must go on.
I can't believe it's not frozen.
I know. Oh, it's the worst when it's half frozen.
That's what it is.
Then you can feel the parts around, the unfrozen parts around. It's like you can feel this. Like that's the worst.
What I love, Scott, is the idea that you could go to an open mic tonight and be all drooly and spittily and have that not react at all to the audience in fear of their lives.
Next up, we've got the wonderful Wardy LePan.
Okay, thank you, folks. Now, give me a chair if you're a retiree. Oh, great. I'm not alone. Now, let me tell you, retirement's great fun. Not only because I have a wife and a car that are both still working, but also because when I do crazy stuff, people aren't sure whether I'm taking the piss out of them or whether I'm seriously senile, right? So, for example, I love going into a pharmacy, grabbing a box of condoms, going up to the counter and asking where the fitting rooms are. And talking of fitting rooms, going to a real fitting room, like in a clothing store somewhere, sitting there for a few minutes and then shouting really loudly, "Oi, there's no toilet paper in here." But my all-time favorite, though, is on an aeroplane. Those long, boring flights when you used to be able to fly. When they come around to serve the food, I always order the stew. And when no one's looking, I slip the stew into one of those bath bags, right? And then I get up and I stumble down the aisle heading towards the loo, making retching noises into the bag. And just before I get to the loo, I stop, turn around, take a fork out of my back pocket, and head back to my seat while eating my stew. Now, if you've never seen synchronized barfing before, let me tell you, it's a sight to behold, right? But what's also fun, though, is the stuff you don't have to do anymore. Like the little annoying things in life, like, I don't know, when you get up in the morning, you have to sniff your underpants to see if you can wear them again, right? I don't do that anymore because I just know I can. And finally, one of the great things about being retired, I started doing stand-up. And it must be going really, really well, because I was asked by the Ottawa Hospital here to be part of a study into whether laughter was really the best medicine. Now, obviously not for diarrhea, but for other issues, right? And they said I played a really important role. I can't remember what they called it, a placebo for the control group or something. But obviously, I'm doing really well. Thank you, folks.
Yay!
Great.
I actually paid attention, and I got a couple of comments. First off, nicely done. And this also should make Jester and Scott feel like they don't matter, because the first piece of advice is general, and that is be careful when opening with a rhetorical question. You ask anybody here retired, you were going to go into your retirement chunk no matter what the answer to that question was. And I think you were expecting there to be not anyone joining in on that. And I've always been taught that if you're a comedian in a room and a comedian on stage asks a rhetorical question, you always answer in the affirmative, so at least one person allows them to continue to do their joke. But if you do use a rhetorical question, whether to start your set or to in the middle of your set, always have an answer ready to go for any answer you can get. And I think you did that very well, Wardy. So nicely done. But it's something I see over and over again, sometimes even in the competition. There was a performer we had that always opened up with, "Hey, where my tequila drinkers at?" And usually that would got a whooping cheer because she was used to working in rowdy bars. But one time we did in the competition, we did a corporate at an upscale athletic club. And she went, "Where my tequila drinkers at?" And nobody responded. But she only had material that made sense if everybody was whooping and hollering for being a tequila drinker. And she fell flat on her face from the very first thing that she said. So I generally advise absolute beginners to avoid rhetoricals. Just say what you're going to say. Don't ask for permission from the audience. But if you do a rhetorical, you did a great job of actually having a response in case you didn't get the answer that you. I loved the stew in the barf bag joke. It also reminds me quickly of a story from the competition. There is an online webcomic called Basic Instructions by Scott Meyer. Very funny, multiple panel, but in one frame type of comic. And Scott did the competition one year. Scott Meyer, the guy who does that comic. And he did a different thing every night. Like one time he did a set as a fez-wearing lounge act, sipping a martini. Another night, he did his act lying on the ground inside a bag and mimicked being born, pulling the bag apart and sticking it. But on the last night he was in there, he did his entire set straight, except that he had a diaper in his hand and a spoon in the other hand and chocolate pudding in the diaper, and then just slowly so reminded me a little bit of that. The last thing I'm going to say that I took notice of is I love the old school construction of repurposing a cliche. I don't think that newer comics do that enough, where you take common phrase you did with laughter is the best medicine and find a way to make that fit into the narrative you're telling. It is one of those tools in the quiver that only people of a certain age or a certain generation will pull out. But if you are ever stuck trying to figure out a way of getting a laugh or one more laugh to a set, using that technique of repurposing the cliche is done right, almost a guaranteed good laugh getter, because it tickles that thing that people remember that, and you've reframed it a little bit that pleases the brain to hear. So nicely done.
Thanks.
To play off Peter's laughter is the best medicine. I wrote down because I feel like there's a joke there within that line. But laughter is the best medicine is the same. It's like saying like I didn't win, but I had fun.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, like laughter is the best medicine. It's like saying I didn't win, but I had fun. Like if you went to a hospital with laughter is the best medicine, you're probably gonna die. Also, we said synchronized barfing. All I put down is like, what song? Like to what song are they barfing? I feel like that'd be like a funny premise. Just a visualization. So like synchronized barfing, and then like just like I mean, I'm kind of like I kind of want details on that. Just not like the barfing part, but just like the parts leading up to it. I think that'd be I like visualization. I can't help it. But yeah, that's good stuff.
Like about the barfing synchronized, you mentioned that if you had headphones in and whatever music you were listening to, if it happened to synchronize with the people vomiting, that might be an interesting addition. Myself, when you mentioned laughter is the best medicine, being in a hospital, I thought that was going to go a different way because in a hospital, medicine is the best medicine.
Right.
So,
That's already done.
they're accommodating.
I remember that from another comedian saying that.
Yeah, it's been done.
What's that? Sorry.
Medicine is the best medicine.
Sure.
In a hospital, but another comic has already said that. I don't know who. But apparently we're on the street right here. And
trying to see what syncs up, like Barf Side of the Moon.
Barf Side of the Moon. Lastly, I would love to hear a British accent explain in a snooty fashion what take the piss out of something means. I'm sure a lot of people know what that means, but I'm not completely firm on what that means. Does that mean joking with somebody?
Yeah, teasing them, sort of thing. And it's a South African accent, not a British one. But
oh, okay. There you go. Yeah, I'm ignorant. Yeah,
no,
really need to know who you are.
My wife thinks I should translate some of those expressions, but I think, and maybe I should. I think about it, but in some ways, when I talk about a toilet, I call it a loo, and people seem to like that. You know, they seem to get it. But it's one that I really need to think more about. Is how to translate some of expressions from the other side of the pond to this side.
So, do you live in Canada now, Wardy?
Yeah.
So how did you respond the first time someone in Canada, as someone from South Africa, how did you respond the first time someone offered you a beer coolie?
A what?
A beer coolie. It's a little like snuggie it's like a little like wetsuit for your beer. It keeps your beer cool.
Oh, a beer cooler. Okay, yeah, no.
In Canada, we call it a coolie, like COOLIE.
I've never heard that. I've never heard that, and I've been here 34 years.
Ontario thing.
No, never heard it.
Oh.
Never heard it. Sorry.
Maybe it's just my family. I don't know.
Koozie with a Z, and that also.
Koozie. Oh, that's what it is.
I know that.
Oh.
Thank you,
Peter.
Peter.
It wrong.
In the songs of American knowledge. I want to join in on that. You know, that is an actual concern when performers go to different places. And I'm a big Anglophile. I love England. I perform in England. I have friends who perform in England. I bought an all-region DVD player so I could shop Amazon.co.uk to buy comedy specials. And I can translate things pretty well. When I go to Canada, I can translate things pretty well. I know my macaroni and cheese from my craft dinner. You understand? Although I've had Canadian audiences tell me, it's like, we know what Sports Center is. You don't have to say Sports Centre. Like, okay, fine. But doing jokes in the Balkans was really tough for me, even though it was all in English, because you have to think of all the idiomatic phrases that you use that they don't. That they're translating in their head from their native language. You know, they're hearing it in English, translating it to their native language, hearing it in English. There was a little delay and cutting out any phrase that was specifically American was something I've never had to do before. Because everywhere else I performed, I kind of knew what it was like. By the end of the tour, the last night show was in Zagreb. I did like 2 hours of stand-up and made it work for an audience that didn't share my frame of reference, because I had learned in my time there enough to kind of get on their level. It didn't hurt that there were a lot of expats in the audience. An English language comedy show, is definitely, it's like the Eddie Izzard goes to France and does his act in French, but everyone there took the channel and they were actually English using their grammar school French to translate it. So he could have said, I should just be doing this in English, is what Eddie ended up saying.
So when you realized you had too many idioms partway through the trip, you realized you were really up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, which was part of the problem.
That was
But I think it matters whether you're talking to an English audience elsewhere. Like if you're talking to an English audience in the UK or Australia or whatever, versus talking to a Slovakian audience who are listening in the second language. I think that's where you got to be really. I imagine that's where it would be much more difficult, and you have to be very careful of the words you use.
Same is true of the opposite way. We've had a lot of comedians in the Seattle scene who are not native English speakers, and the job is just so hard trying to translate again what's funny in your head in such a way that the audience can understand it. And some of just the shorthand that we all use is inapplicable. I always say it this way, but for them to hear it, it has to be like this. Even little things, like we Canadian comics, you always have to set them down. It's like, we don't have hydro bills. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have power and light, type of thing. In California, they always just talk about Kaiser Permanente, which we in Washington didn't have until just a couple of years ago. To understand that your the things that you find comfortable and normal sometimes need to be translated for other audiences when you find yourself there.
Yeah, and I think there are words like pants, for example, in here mean trousers, but pants in the UK mean underpants. And one of the big things that got me first was fanny.
Yes.
Now, a fanny is a butt here, but a fanny across the pond is a vagina, right? So when people started talking about fanny packs, I thought that was hilarious, But there are things like that one has to be really careful of. I find
the classic one is referring to cigarettes as fags and smoking them. It's a homophobic epithet in the States.
Yeah.
But very natural to say and to sing in song lyrics from British bands.
Especially if you're writing jokes about your experiences during quarantine. If your audience doesn't know what a flat is, you're fucked.
Yeah, it just takes a little while to, acclimatize yourself to where you're going to be performing. And that's what makes road comedy. I have this classic story of Tom Cotter, who did win the Seattle International Comedy Competition, married, I think, to April Macy, I think. He was on Last Comic Standing. He's a road dog from the 80s. And he came to do a show in Seattle, and it was, I love Tom to death, but it was very clear that his act had not changed very much since the boom period. And he did a whole thing about phrases we say and taking their literal meaning, and he got to, like, up the wazoo. Where's the wazoo? Unfortunately, in Washington State University is known as Wazoo. When he says, "Where's the Wazoo?" the entire audience en masse yelled out, "Pullman," which is the city in Washington. And Tom had such a deer in the headlights look, like, I don't know how to process what just happened. Because you'd have to know what they were referring to, which he didn't. He'd have to know where Pullman was, which he didn't. And his system rebooted. You just see this frozenness And then he just went on with the joke. He didn't address it. He didn't, engage with the audience to find out something. And the audience, one by one, started leaving because they felt like he was on rails. And if he didn't know the things and wasn't interested in finding out and just kept doing the joke, they were no longer all that interested in sticking around. Trust me, I have learned if anyone yells out Pullman in my act, I'm going to find out why the fuck they did that. That's the thing I've learned.
Yeah, especially if anyone yells something unfamiliar all in unison, that warrants investigating.
Right?
Yeah. Next up, we've got Lucia Ribeiro.
Okay. So my random word is nudist. And can people hear me okay? Because I'm getting an echo on my end.
Yeah, I'm getting the echo.
I got an echo too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. What should I do about this?
I hear you okay, even with the echo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just go through
Okay.
at 70% volume.
Pardon me?
Just go through at like 70% volume. I'll mute anyone if I find the echo.
Okay. If we existed as walking, talking cartoons in some kind of permanent Ativan life, then we would consider becoming a nudist. Why bother with clothing? Just live life as a mellowed out drawing. Being an illustration, your fattiness is represented in a more attractive manner. I imagine it would be that way. I would be rounder and more symmetrical, but most people would be skinny, less to draw. The labor laws, work smarter, not harder. Is it ever the sexy and fit people wanting to be around rando nudists? I think it's the less attractive, doughier ones that set up nude sects. Someone's always wanting to be a guru, proclaiming too much that it's not about sex, just about honesty and finally getting rid of bras. They take on causes that have nothing to do with their life. Of course, it's men that want to be the king of all nudists. As nudists, most of the jobs we'd have would be of the standing kind: security guards, referees, greeters. For some reason, we would need a lot more greeters. Life would just be long, drawn-out conversations moving from one conference to the next, orgy still on pause. In this kind of existence, you would have to explain why you had clothes on. As if clothes are so bothersome and heavy. Let's figure out a way to get them off people rather than the usual way of buying a potential sex partner dinner and complimenting them. Imagine suddenly not needing to spend money on clothes anymore. Sure, some jobs would still require aprons, but that would be a concession. If we were living as nude cartoons, part of the fun would be to get clothes drawn back on, appearing at sudden times with no preparation or explanation from our artistic overlords. Time for another fashion show. This is probably too sexy, but if you suddenly notice you have clothes on, you can be sure that you also became a politician. Of course, within 3 years, this utopia would disintegrate into chlamydia camp. There is probably an app to help you trace past sexual partners, so that's a good way to be reminded of their names. That's it. Thank you.
That was fun, Lucia. Thank you. That was really fun. I love how you phrase things. That's the best part about hearing comedy writers who you're not familiar with. Just the choices that they made. The jobs we want are of the standing kind. I loved how you phrased that. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. The one thing I would say, and this is common to every writer, when translating it for stand-up, try to make sure that you're not just reading what you wrote. Try to make it conversational. Try and make it sound like something you say. Write like something you say. There's a tendency for writers to sound like an essay, where what their writing would be clever on the page, but when translated to how you say it, the emphasis you use, the natural repetition of certain phrases gets lost. So commit your ideas to your memory and then practice saying these things without reading them, so they just become a natural part of speech. Rather than memorize it, try and make it sound just like something that you would say. That would be the next level up. Like, this is really good material, should get laughs, did get laughs. Now let's hear it as if it was like not written, but just said. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's for everybody. That's not just, I hope you don't feel like I'm picking on you. It's just something I thought of because it was well written. And
yeah, that's okay. I read it because I didn't have it memorized. I've been told that I might be a humorist. I like doing comedy. I like being on stage and, experiencing the moment to moment of coming up with new things on the spot. But I'm finding that lately with doing some online exercises, it's been mostly reading and sounding like an essay, as you said.
But again, the project you're given here, come up with 2 minutes of a random phrase in a short amount of time is going to lend itself to having things written on paper and not having gone over it a bunch. I wouldn't expect anybody here to have a ready to go on stage bit from this exercise, but as you're looking at what you could do, that would be my recommendation based on what I heard. I love the idea of you wanting to be a humorist. I do think that there is a market for that because a lot of people just don't want to go to comedy clubs and have that experience, but still would like to laugh. I think something could be built. I know that like the Moth storytelling thing was really big a few years ago here in the States. Before that, slam poetry, and you'd get some comedians who didn't really like doing stand-up comedy, just translate the material for that market. I would have to believe that there are lots of opportunities, untapped opportunities for someone performing for an audience that likes to laugh but doesn't want the 2-drink minimum, hey, that's a dumb looking shirt you're wearing type of comedy experience. So yeah, if that's what you're into, I think that's a definite, great avenue to pursue. It's a little harder. You have to make your own situations, but I bet that would be successful.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Peter.
You bet.
All right, thanks. Next up, paging Dr. Ellen. Dr. Ellen to the stage. We need Dr. Ellen to the stage. Thank you very much.
I love that.
You guys, thank you. I will start by saying I already feel guilty. I have no topic. And how wonderful. Oh my God, how wonderful this is. Now, okay, so I'm older. You can tell I'm older. The good news for you about me being older is that I know what I like. I like coffee, I like men, and I like a battery-powered device near my bed. And well, being older, I'm in between husbands, and and I am an emergency room doctor. I should have clarified that from the beginning, but I'm in between other people's husbands. Let me make that clear. It is very expensive to keep a husband. I've tried that. But, what can I say? I mean, really the most successful thing. Now, Lucia was saying this earlier. Laughter is the best medicine. Whenever I hear that laughter is the best medicine, it makes me feel like I was socked in the gut. And medicine is the best medicine. You know what I think? Nice is the best medicine. Being nice. That's my favorite. But I have ADD, I have dyslexia, and I get bored. So my other favorite part about medicine is blood. I like blood a lot. But what do you think is the hardest part about being a doctor? Aside, you can tell that I have ADD and dyslexia, and you can also tell that the medicine has worn off. I'm sorry, it lasts about 6 hours, and I have not slept. But, so what can I tell you? So in ending, because I do remember this one, I must say, being a person of a certain age, I must remind you, always remember that a funeral except for you, Peter, I will apologize for that. A funeral is not a sad event. It is an opportunity for me to find young men with mommy issues whom I can manipulate for sexual favors. Thank you. You laughed. I love it. Thank
That
you.
was great.
That was gold.
Oh,
And never feel like you need to apologize for a funny joke. Trust me. As someone who's been in the comedy industry and dealt with lots of things before, I appreciate the concern, but no, make your joke, make it funny, and you did. Nicely done. I love that your personality comes out like right from the start, and there was some good technical stuff in there, good structure. The rule of threes, I know what I like, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for bam, there's the joke, perfectly delivered. The only thing I would say about that is looking for a man being the second one too close to the battery operated device. Most women would tell me no, that they're not close at all. So maybe I'm but yeah, that's what I liked. It was natural, but I could tell there was technique happening. And that, as a person who loves killing the frog by examining comedy at a nuts and bolts level, I love that stuff. I love when the phrase I use in my my comedy writing class is when the scaffolding is taken away. Like, you use certain formulas and certain structural techniques to develop the joke, and then you pull the scaffolding back and the joke works without those support structures. I love that. And I love, being able to, as someone who has studied this, that I can tell the work gone into it. But the audience can't, because it comes out natural without seeming like you're seeing all the joined welds. So, nicely done.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was. I always enjoy watching you perform, like on Zoom, of course. But yeah, your personality, it's hilarious. I feel like there's an opportunity for the rule of three. I feel like there's a tag there for misdirect. You talked about how you like this, you like coffee. And you said a battery powered device. I feel like you can make a misdirect, and you say and by that I mean pacemaker. You're talking about your age. You know what I mean? If you want to go that way. Also,
but it'd have to be a defibrillator. That would be good, though.
Yeah, something. Yeah, exactly. So you got it.
But when they're dead, you leave them dead. I'm telling you. I mean, at least in the bedroom, right?
There you go. You got 3 tags out of that. I think.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, 2 Canadian tags. So also, you said medicine's medicine, no, nice is medicine. I feel like nice could be an acronym for something. Like, it could be like nice, and then you can say like and then it could be a misdirect in itself because it's 4 letters, right? So I'm a word nerd, so I always think of stuff like that.
No internal containers exposed.
Yeah.
Nice.
See, yeah, nice.
Not intensively cunty every time.
All right.
There you go. So I feel like there's an acronym possibility for that. But once again, good stuff.
In case you're wondering, in America, that wouldn't do well on TV.
Oh man, that's Lucia. That is awesome. I believe that the C word. There's a reason for the C word to be around.
Yes.
Yeah. Could I say also? Were you done, Scott? Okay. So when you were talking about coffee and men, I thought it was going in a direction of them making coffee for you the next morning, if you deemed them worthy of still being around. And then about the battery operated device, maybe you could have them in different drawers throughout your home. And then that way you'd probably be a little paranoid about people coming over and wanting to rummage through your kitchen drawers. That drawer. And then he could say something like, I don't feel intimidated at all.
I love the idea that you don't want to be too far away from, at any point in time in your house, from a battery operated.
When the mood strikes.
Installing them like defibrillators.
Yeah. This is an old reference, but I love the idea of adding, I've fallen and I can't get off.
It's Lucia and my tour. I've fallen and I can't get off. That is so
I
awesome.
want Lucia and Ellen to go on tour. That would be awesome. I would book and promote that show nationwide. That'd be awesome.
I feel like there's like a medical alert joke there somewhere too.
I loved your one-liners.
Oh yeah.
I loved your one-liners like I'm between husbands at the moment. That was clever. I really liked those.
The very first, I shouldn't say the very first. I did 3 times beforehand, but the first time I did stand up with a graduation show for my beginning class, I had a running bit about that between this because I had just gotten dumped and I had just the place I was working at decided to close on the same weekend. And so, I'm between girlfriends right now, or I'm between jobs right now, or I'm between happiness, right? So it was a running thing throughout the set. Yeah, I picked up on that one too. Between husbands, between other people's husbands. That's solid. I think that's it.
Yeah. All right. Then finally tonight, we've got our headliner, director of talent for both the San Francisco comedy competition and the Seattle International Comedy Competition. It's Peter Greyy.
Yay!
No pressure. So how did I teach absolute beginners how to do stand-up comedy? And I always have one question when I meet them. Why? Do I look happy up here? No, save yourself, run. But the answer they often give me is that I want to break out of my comfort zone. And that's a weird phrase to me. Like, is it a prison? Like, it's a hard time, kid, sending you to the comfort zone. When I hear comfort zone, I think of one of those furniture and mattress stores that advertises late at night. Like, come down to the comfort zone. We got a deal for you. I 11 bean bags. Get yourself a room full of shag carpeting for 20% off. That's right down here. That's the comfort zone. But if that's true, then why would you want to break out of it? What's going on there? Did you get locked in? Like, did you try out a mattress and it was so comfortable you fell asleep and then woke up and everything was dark and empty? That's weird. I can imagine that phone call. Hey, can you break me out of the comfort zone, please? Yeah, it was very comfortable. Which comfort zone? My comfort zone. The one where I feel comfortable enough to just hop onto a mattress and sleep here forever. Break me out of this, please. Probably doesn't. I grew up with sport. So the whole idea of a comfort zone is weird because when sports people get into the zone, it's usually much more aggressive than anything comfortable. You know what I'm saying? He was really in the zone, or we're going to shut them down with our man-to-man zone. It's like, I don't have a comfort zone. I've got a comfort area. I've got a comfort proximity. I don't have a comfort zone. That's way too aggressive. It probably wouldn't work either. Can you imagine a basketball coach putting in the comfort zone? Yeah, you just go ahead and score. We're all going to be over here sitting in the corner, being comfortable in our zone. Have fun. It also sounds like to me like a bad science fiction movie, Comfort Zone. Like it would be riffed on by Mystery Science Theater with Robert Zadar and PJ Souls and Bruce Boxleitner. Escape from the comfort zone. This is where my 4 minutes of preparation fails me. I think breaking out of your comfort zone is just a fancy way of saying, hey, I'm going to do something uncomfortable. For example, hey, I want to break out of my comfort zone. I'm going to stick needles in my nose. Break it out of my comfort zone. Or I'm gonna watch a Rudy Giuliani press conference. That's breaking out of my comfort zone. I'm going to tell my parents I'm not having sex. That's breaking me out of my comfort zone. As I've never done this before, I didn't know which order that rule of three should go. Breaking out of your comfort zone. That's just asking you to do some shit you don't want to do. You know, I don't want to do the dishes. Come on, son, break out of your comfort zone and get those dishes. Didn't have a closer. I had 4 minutes. That's what I had on comfort zone, everybody.
Oh, that was really. I mean, naturally, we knew it would be going to be good. That was really good. I wrote up many things. Surprisingly, my mouth is still frozen, but I don't care how comfortable I'm not. So you're talking about with the COVID thing, like, you know, why? I put down, like, I had two questions: why and who books that? Because it's a comic thing. We're talking about how the comfort zone sounds like was it like a sale at like a department store or whatever. I feel like for the directions, you're like just 2 blocks down the danger zone, take a right on the Twilight Zone, and right in front of the Hill Zone.
The first time I got to do stand-up in Edmonton, I drove around town just looking for things, and I couldn't believe that there were so many mattress stores called The Brick. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not buying something to sleep on at a place called The Brick.
Oh, I never thought about that. I know we're notorious for hotels with water slides.
True.
I wrote down my zone was built for comfort, not for pleasure.
Nice.
And then when you're talking about your sports analogy, I thought that'd be funny if it was like there's a sports zone. It's like, you know, you have to make this play, but no pressure. There'll be milk and cookies waiting for you regardless.
Nice. If I were standing up and performing as a person of size, I might have done this is my comfort zone.
But that's all I got. But yeah, that was so enjoyable. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, it's great.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of pillows and blankets, but also of grilled cheese and soup. Welcome to the comfort zone.
Perfect. That was one direction I had written down, comparing and contrasting it to comfort food. And that would have also led me to, after I eat comfort food, it goes into my comfort zone type of a reaction. Thanks.
That's great.
Maybe I should still do this. Should I not retire? Is that what you're telling? No. Maybe
Never.
I'm good in 2-minute workshop bursts, but actually going back on the road, no. Go ahead, stay at home, Peter. I get you. I feel the vibe you're giving me.
Peter, you find your comfort zone in comedy. You find your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You follow.
Like I said, I'll just host Ellen and Lucia on their tour.
Off we go. Man, 2 hours though? That's amazing. You did 2 hours of stand-up? I can't even fathom that.
What if Ellen brings a laptop? Peter can open it for you, literally. Host the show.
I'm opening for it, yes. Ellen, the longest show I ever did was in my hometown. And it was in the community theater that I used to do plays at. And it was just me. There was no opener. It was cold open, me start off. And my first line killed. And they just said, we're not even going to time you to do as much as you want. I thought I was going to do 45, but it turned out I had a lot of local stuff to add to my normal act. And then like my first closer hit, so I went to my murder, death, kill closer, and that hit. And then I had a joke I never did, because I just didn't feel comfortable doing it, and that murdered. I got huge. I had done 2 hours and 20 minutes, held their attention the entire time.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's one of those things I should have retired right then, because it was never going to get better.
Right.
So yeah, mic drop, I'm out of here.
Wow, that's magic. That is magic.
I'm sorry, it sounded like a humble brag. The other fun thing about that was that my parents were in the front row, and I did a joke about how in Portland, Oregon, they don't let you pump your own gas. It's like a 5-minute bit. And I said, like, you think it's about, I'll do part of the bit, but you think that it's about like you think that it's about safety, but it's not. It's about jobs. They want to hire some angry person to stick their hose in, type of thing. And I said, with the economy as bad as it is, I'm really worried. You know, like, hey, are you tying your shoes? Not in Portland. Come over here. Hey, trying to brush your teeth? Not in Portland. Come over here. And I paused and I said, if they ban masturbation, I'm never going back to Portland again. Because you think it'll be fancy, like a full service station, but it's not. It's just one guy grabbing the hose. So that was the bit. And as I'm telling the bit, I'm looking away, but I remembered that my mom was in the front row. And so I just held my view where it was. And I said, can someone check on my mom? Is she still breathing? Is she fine? Is she okay? And she gave me one of those Catholic mom looks at the end of the show. And I'm like, it was funny. It was funny. Thanks for playing a part.
That's great. I love that.
Great.
Any more feedback for Peter's set?
Yeah. I have just one comment. When you were talking about wanting to get out of your comfort zone of sticking needles in your nose,
Yes.
I was thinking it would be an even more heightened comfort zone if you were blindfolded and someone else was sticking the needles on your nose.
Here's the thing with that bit, and I apologize because I couldn't read my own writing, so I told the third joke, which I had actually changed from Rudy Giuliani press conference to watching the Carlson show. That should have been the third one, but I didn't read my own writing, so I told it second and then told it was tell your parents that you're broke. But for the rule of three to have that snap, that mathematical snap, the difference between the two unfunny answers and the third one should be greater. And I didn't have time to really refine that. I probably should have gone for two things that are mildly uncomfortable and not pins in the nose, because that was the shock answer when I was really building up to the third answer. The first two should be mildly uncomfortable things. And I think that a lot of comedians, when they start to work with rule of three, try so hard to give three funny examples, and that's not why it works. It works because it's not funny, but establishes the pattern. The second one confirms the pattern. The third one breaks the pattern. And if these were literally 10 minutes before this thing opened, trying to come up with something. I had some vague ideas, but I wanted to have a presentation for them. If I were to really work on this beyond this, that would be what I would try to do. I would go through variations of what those first two should be and what the right zinger at the end should be. And that's the part about comedy writing. I love doing that with other people. Like, that's what a lot of my beginning comedy class, when it's done in person, is me helping them find that right way to describe it. And I think that I have suffered for a while now from a weird sort of writer's block where I can do that for other people, but I don't know what I want to talk about. And that's why this was really fun, Scott, because you gave me something to talk about. So the skills kicked in. It's like, okay, I'm going to do something about comfort. But what I think I'm going to do is, like, I'm going to call Scott like every week and have him just give me new words. And then by the end of the month, I should have an act again. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's great format.
Yeah.
Can I get a quick plug in, Chester, before you close things out?
Absolutely.
So I do teach a class I call Joke Craft, which is probably not for anybody here, but for anyone who is like an absolute beginner at the structural side of comedy writing. I do teach it via Zoom through rekindleschool.com. There is a June session of it that has spots open, and that's rare. Usually these things sell out pretty quick, but I've done two in quick succession because I hadn't been teaching for a while and I kind of felt the oats. So if anyone was curious about seeing what I did when I taught people back in the before times, this is probably the closest online approximation. I only talk about joke writing, however. I don't go into performance other than how it informs the joke writing process. The beginning comedy classes might start up again later this year, but those are, again, in person, and only will happen when the theater that we use for the graduation show can admit 100% capacity. So we're not there yet, but we're getting closer. And this long international nightmare may soon come to an end. So I'm not expecting anyone to actually sign up and take the class. You guys are all strong joke writers already. But I wanted to toss that out there in case you knew of people that were just starting out and wanted a guided path that might help those early open mic times, like to start off with something that could possibly work. So that's what I'm offering.
Great.
Excellent. And I'd like to plug the workshop. You can search for The Comedy Workshop on Facebook. It's an excellent supportive community where we give each other random word assignments, and we all have an opportunity to work on materials. We run daily workshops. It's completely free of charge, and we're streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So search for us on Facebook under The Comedy Workshop. Anyone else got any plugs?
Nope.
Oh, I just wanted to extend one more thing. Sorry for interrupting, Jester. Great.
I was just going to thank everybody. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I was supposed to say great hosting for Jester. Thank you so much for covering, because my face is, well, Canadian apparently. But also, you guys are all done the workshop plenty of times, and I'm always happy to have you anytime. Peter, would love to have you on any of our upcoming workshops. If you're ever free, they're 10 p.m. EST. You just talk to myself or Kevin Eggleston, and we will love to put you on any day that is a convenient for you. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you again, everybody. Sorry, Jester.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Good to meet you guys.
Great. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.